Hi, welcome to the channel. My name is Richard and I am the Bull Rider, and today I'm going to show you how to change out the timing system on a Lamborghini Gallardo Superleggera. And what I'm going to show you works perfectly for any 2004 to 2008 Lamborghini Gallardo, but also what I'm going to show you basically works for any chain-driven Volkswagen, Audi, Lamborghini derived V6, V8, or V10, basically made in the last 20 years. So stick around for that if you have any car from Volkswagen made in the last 20 years. So first I'm going to show you the special tools that we're going to need, and then I'm going to recommend that you pull the motor for this job and also pull the cylinder heads off. And before you pull the cylinder heads off, I'm going to recommend that you time the motor to TDC and install the crank lock pin and the cam lock pin. So let's go ahead and do that, and we'll jump right in and get this motor timed. Right, so we're going to need some special tools for this, but it's pretty simple and I'll link everything for you in the description below. So we're going to need 2 torque wrenches, a crankshaft locking pin, a crankshaft rotating tool, a cam phaser turning tool, a 24mm crow's foot, 2 camshaft locking bars, a cylinder head removal tool, and then a good set of 12-point triple star tools. I'm going to be putting a different set of cylinder head bolts in here, so I'm going to be using this extended length 12-point triple star M12 for that operation, but we'll get into that. We're going to line up the line on the harmonic balancer with the line on the engine block itself. Then we're going to look at the camshafts and look for the 2 bolt holes for the cam lock pin. And if those are facing towards you and you can put the cam lock pin in, then that's a good indication that we're at TDC. So after we rotate the motor to TDC, we're going to put the crank lock pin in. And you can find the housing for the crank lock pin by locating the T50 Torx located on the lower oil sump. To the right, we have the oil drain port, but right here we have the crank lock pin location. So take this plug out, and then underneath you're going to put in the crank lock pin. You're going to find a depression on the crank that's actually cut away, and that's where the crank lock pin sits in. So you're going to have to make sure that the crank lock pin is fully secured inside of that crankshaft, and that the crankshaft doesn't move even a millimeter. And even if you play with it back and forth by trying to rotate the crankshaft, it won't move at all whatsoever. With the crankshaft locked and the camshafts locked, we can remove the cylinder head timing covers, remove the cam phasers by loosening the 12-point triple star bolts, and removing the cam phasers from the camshafts, releasing them from the timing chain. And then we can take out our first timing chain tensioner on both cylinder heads. After that, we can remove the cylinder heads. So first thing I want to point out is how to take this cover off. It's held on by T45 Torx and a couple T30 as well, but the main thing I want to point out is the shaft for the all-wheel drive system. So first off, you're going to remove the clutch, and it's pressed into this housing. So what you're going to want to do is apply pressure to the backside of this housing, and then start hitting it with a rubber mallet or something equivalent, and the shaft will start coming out of the cover. You're going to make a huge mess on a pre-LP Gallardo, but if you have a post-LP, you actually have a drain port on the bottom of this cover, and you can actually drain the oil that's located in this housing area. All right, so the first thing we're going to want to do is take the chains off for both the left cylinder head and the right cylinder head. Then we can put this on the table. So in here is a lot simpler than you think. We have this chain that attaches to the crankshaft for the accessories. So we have the oil pump, the water pump, the air conditioner, compressor, and then the power steering pump, all powered by this chain. And timing doesn't really matter on it. It's just one chain tensioner and one chain. And then in here we have a hydraulic cylinder that's pressured by oil pressure, and then there's a spring in here as well. And then we have the main chain right here that gives power to the cylinder heads and turns the camshafts. So we have a tensioner right here that we're going to be replacing, and then a tensioner guide shoe, and then 2 pads that you can see. So you'll see this guide shoe fail very frequently, sometimes even as early as 45,000 miles if you neglect your car and you neglect oil changes. We're going to be upgrading this to a pad from a B7 RS4, and it's an all-metal guide shoe. So it's going to be a lot stronger, and Lamborghini is going to say that the all-metal guide shoe doesn't fit in this location, but it does. And if you have a B6 S4, it's a common thing to replace this plastic guide shoe with a metal guide shoe. So if you have a loud ticking coming from this area, like right next to the transmission and then right next to the back of the motor, it's a good chance that it might be this that has failed. I haven't heard from any Lamborghini owners that have reported that this has failed. You know, us Lamborghini guys, we like to change the oil very frequently, so our cars usually don't get neglected that much. A formal diagnosis will let you know if this is true or not, and I recommend replacing this at least every 100,000 miles, this whole chain assembly. So the first thing we're going to want to do is compress the chain tensioner and guide shoe assembly for the accessory drive chain. And we're just going to get a screwdriver and we're going to place it somewhere behind it, and you can see that hydraulic pressure leaking from there. And then we can get a hex key and then place it right into this hole, and then you see that the chain is loose. Look at that, money. Next, we're going to remove the T30 Torx located here, 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 and finally right here. And then we're going to take out the chain tensioner first. Okay, and these guide shoes have like two little prongs on the side of them. So, and it kind of holds the chain on both sides of the guide shoe. So what we're going to do is just pull on the chain a little bit and kind of just try to get it off of there. It's a little bit tricky on this one because it's like so monolithic, right? Wait, get in there. I should get a screwdriver. Let's see here. Come on, there we go. Nice. And we're gonna take the chain at the same time. Next, we're gonna compress the chain tensioner for the main chain that feeds the cams. So we're gonna use our screwdriver and then compress it. And if your hex key isn't big enough, the compressor won't stay put. So just keep that in mind. There we go, look at that, money. I wanna point out one thing really quick. So you might notice in the following scenes that these two sprockets are actually loose. And you do not need to do this on this car. On other cars, you need to do that so you can actually have clearance to get the timing chain off. But in this car, you don't need to do that. So just don't even touch those fasteners. And if you do, the one on the left is a T30 Torx that's torqued down to 10 Newton meters, and the one on the right is torqued down to 42 Newton meters, and it's a 12-point triple star. And then to give ourselves a little bit of slack, we'll pull this chain guide off as well. And it's just held in with little dowel pins, and then the two depressions on the chain guide itself actually prevent it from falling off of the chain. So it just literally just pops right off. Wait for it. Wait for it. Come on. There you go, just like that. Isn't that nice? And the same goes for this chain guide. You just have to pull it off and get it loose from the actual chain itself. And then it should, I'm so close. There it is, got it, look at that. And then last but not least, we have the chain guide for the tensioner. Just lift it up and pull it off slowly. There we go, got it. All right, then let's pull the tensioner off, last but not least. And it's not a T27, it's not a T35. It must be a T30. And there's an O-ring integrated into this chain tensioner, so be sure to not let that drop into your sump, okay? And then the chain just comes right off, or it should. Come on. There we go. Got that side, got this side. Good, look at that. Next, we're gonna move the cover for the accessory drive gear mechanism and just more T30 Torx. And it pops right off. You might need to pry just a little bit here and underneath. And it should slowly just come out. Should. Come on, there we go. And then behind here, we have two O-rings that we're gonna need to replace. And when you replace these, put a little bit of assembly lubricant on them so that way you don't misplace them when assembling it back onto the block in these orifice holes, and they don't wash out once they see oil pressure. And also while we're in here, be sure to clean off this gasketed surface. It's almost impossible to reach without this cover taken off. And there's an O-ring inside of this shaft. So let's pull it out. Clean it up. And the O-ring's got a square profile, so be a little bit careful when it comes to installing it and just take your time. Next, we have everyone's favorite part, which is taking off all the gasketed surface of all that old RTV. So I'll spare you the pain and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. And we can put those two little O-rings inside those that body right there with a little bit of assembly lubricant, just like that. Make sure they don't pop out. And then we can go ahead and reinstall this cover plate back onto the car. And the torque specifications for all these T30 Torques is 10 Newton meters. Next, we can focus on getting the main chain back onto these two pulleys and then the crank. So I'm going to start with the left pulley first. Doesn't really matter, just thought it was a little bit easier. And then I'm going to go around the crank. Let's see here. Come on. Make sure it's in the right area. There we go. Cool. All right, so let's do the top chain guide first. I already put a little bit of assembly lubricant on here. And so when the motor starts up, we're good to go and we won't have any sort of weird chain rattle. Make sure everything's nice and lubricated when we start this V10 back up. So pretty excited. You can see how when you have it properly installed, it's going to be seated between the two grooves on the top of the chain guide. So when you hold it down and you push it back and forth, it's properly seated. So make sure to do that. Okay, now the upgraded RS4 chain guide on the lower left portion of the main chain. Come on. There we go. There we go. Make sure it's fully seated. Looking good. Okay, we're almost done with this chain. We have one more guide shoe and then the tensioner. There we go. Just like that. Looks good, doesn't it? Fully seated, again, lubricated. Last but not least, we have the chain tensioner. And don't forget, we have an O-ring right on the back of that. So put a little bit of assembly lube on there and then put that O-ring in. And then put a little bit of assembly lube right on the top of that piston face. And then put that tensioner right in there. And I personally got new fasteners for this. You don't have to, but I do not want to see the inside of this motor for quite a while. At least another 100,000. So I just spent like 20 bucks on new fasteners and called it a day. And the torque spec on these two bad boys is 10 Newton meters because it's, of course, a T30 Torques. All right, now we're going to work on the accessory chain. This one's a little bit tricky, so I'm going to start at the accessory gear system at the bottom left and just try to fish it onto that mechanism. And try to fish it onto that mechanism and get that out of the way. Okay, and then the chain comes around the crank like this, around like that, and then over the top like this. And then when we get the tensioner on there, it's going to fit in this area. On this back of this tensioner, there we have an oil port and then an associated gasket. So same as before, we're going to put a little bit of assembly lubricant in here, put the gasket in, and then install it onto the car. And be sure to lubricate those guides, all the guides. This is the biggest one, but it's one monolithic piece, so it's pretty nice assembly overall. See here. So it's going to be a little bit tricky because I have to place it in there, get it mounted on the chain, make sure I don't hit that O-ring and dislodge it, and then also throw those fasteners in there. So wish me luck. Let's see what we got. Okay, this left side's looking good. Okay, I'm working on the bottom, and now I'm working on that one big shoe on the right. Let's see here. Okay, we're getting closer. Okay, got that fastener in. My hands are doused in assembly lubricant, so that's fun. Okay, now the two bottom ones. Okay, and then we're gonna make sure that the chain is sitting on there nice and happy, looking good. Okay, and then 10 Newton meters on these fasteners as well. Then we're gonna pull the two tensioners, one for the accessory chain and then one for the main chain. There we go. You see how it tensioned up right there? Now the main chain. Okay. Now we can throw the timing chains on for the right side and the left. So I'm going to recommend that you take the cylinder head off to do this job for one reason, because if you look at the cylinder head gasket, you can see that this sealing portion for the main timing chain cover is integrated into the head gasket. Interesting design, nevertheless. Might be a big pain in the butt for some of us, but that's okay. So I'm going to ask you, if we have the cylinder head on here, how the heck are we going to be able to get this timing chain cover back on without scraping our cylinder head gasket all to hell and having leakage issues on a used gasket? So I'm going to recommend that we take the heads off and we do it properly and we get a good seal on here with the new cylinder head gasket and we call it a day. So a quick note about cylinder head bolts. On the left, we have a OEM Lamborghini cylinder head bolt, and on the right, we have a Audi Volkswagen cylinder head bolt. This one nets for $55 each, and you can't reuse them. This one nets $3 each, and you can't reuse them. So overall, it's gonna cost you about $1,300 for cylinder head bolts, and I really can't recommend it, okay? So I found this part number, and it's a direct match with one exception. On the left, we have the OEM bolt, and on the right, we have the Audi Volkswagen bolt. This is a 12-point triple star, and then this is one of those special spline bolts that we use to take the cylinder head off. And that inherently is the only difference. Same metallurgical properties, same length, same thread length, same everything except for just the head type. So I have a special tool where I can actually use this, and I'm gonna buy the $3 bolt any day that I can and save myself a significant amount of money. But I'll let you decide if you want to do that or not. Right, so we're going to start putting RTV on all these surfaces. So you can see a machined groove inside this timing cover. And what we're going to do is we're going to put RTV, a thin bead all around, everywhere you see the groove. And then for flat regions like this, we're going to put a little bit on, and then we're going to kind of dab it on. It doesn't need to have to be a bead or anything like that, just a continuous surface located all throughout here. I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. This is what it should look like when it's done. And then you see that continuous bead all the way around. Okay, so we're going to put the timing cover on, and this is kind of sketchy because I think this is right. Hold on. So I have my lovely assistant holding the timing chains up while I put this timing cover on. And we also have that integrally mounted PTO shaft for the all-wheel drive system. So this is going to be the biggest pain in the butt because we have to make sure that we have enough gap around here not to start messing with the RTV that we just put on. And we also have to get that bearing pressed in. Oh, it's going on. Look at that. Oh, that's sexy. What do you think, sweetie? Sexy?
Very sexy.
Very sexy.
It's a sexy scene.
Well, you helped me take this thing off. You remember that? It was a pain in the ass. Do you remember that?
I don't remember.
Remember how I was like hammering the hell out of this thing?
Oh yeah, I remember.
So all we're doing is we're just giving it some light, this input shaft, some light tappy tap taps, just to get it to slide on. And I also put some PB Blaster on it just to convince it to do the same.
Sexiest thing I've seen all day.
Thank you, sweetie. Okay, so we can put these down. I just didn't want them to drop into the depths of hell when I was putting everything on, and I didn't want it to like jam, if that makes sense. So now that we got that, we're good to go. We're gonna tighten all the T45 down to 25 Newton meters. And then all the T30 are 10 Newton meters. So the block is set to TDC with the crank lock pin. And the cylinder heads are cranked to TDC with the cam block pin on both of the cylinder heads. Right, so we're gonna throw the cylinder head gasket on first. I'll line it up with the dowels on the block. Okay. Okay, I see that dowel position on that one.
You can see it?
Kinda.
I think you need to go up more.
There it is.
There it is. Can you get it on that one?
Yeah, okay. Okay, and I'm gonna throw the cylinder head bolts in with a little bit of oil. So we're gonna throw the fasteners in, just hand tight. The torque order for this doesn't matter at first. So I just wanna get them all just into the block, just hand tight to where they just interface at the bottom of the head. First, we're gonna tighten down all these fasteners to 30 Newton meters in this very specific torque order. And I'll be sure to show you the torque order on the screen for a few seconds. So if you're doing it yourself, you can pause it. All right, then we do all the fasteners to 60 Newton meters. And then 90 degrees. And then another 90 degrees. I'm starting on the second fastener. I forgot to turn on the dang camera. First, I wanted to talk to you about these camshaft chain tensioners. I have the one that I pulled off the car on the left, and then I have the one I'm going to use on the right. And I want you to take a quick look at these, and I want you to tell me which one would you put on your car. This one has a plastic guide shoe, and this one has an all-metal guide shoe. The problem with this, though, is that Lamborghini is going to tell you that this part doesn't fit. It's directly identical. It has exactly the same hydraulic piston size, same mounting points. The only difference is the revised shoe hardware. And this is really odd. And this is really odd because it has a Audi part number and an Audi logo on it. And when you call Audi, they're going to tell you that this part doesn't even exist in their database anymore because it's so old. And then you're going to call Lamborghini and they're going to tell you that you still have to buy this old part number because this new one won't fit. I think they're full of it. So I'm going to put this brand new one on my car. I can't officially tell you that it fits, but I think you can be the judge and decide if you want to use the latest revision with the revised shoe and the revised hardware, or if you want to use the old piece of crap plastic one. And it's the same with the other side. You have the part that I pulled off with the plastic shoe, and then you have the revised hardware with the metal shoe. And if you're buying this from an Audi parts catalog, you can get the INA branded chain tensioner and save a little bit of cash because you know why? It's an Audi part. So what they do is they just charge you a little bit more, put an Audi logo on it, and then what they did is there used to be an Audi logo right here and an Audi part number, but they just conveniently shaved that off with a CNC machine just so they could charge a little bit less for it. Now let's get that cam chain tensioner in there. And if you look on the other side, there is a integrated metal gasket. So make sure that's on there, and then we can just fish it in. If we got it out, we sure as heck can get it back in. So let's be a little patient, make sure it guides on the chain correctly. And 6 new fasteners. You don't have to use new fasteners. And then the torque spec on all these is 10 Newton meters. All right, let's get those cam phasers on. Don't worry about getting them mixed up. One of them is intake and the other one is exhaust, and they're marked that on the actual cam phaser itself. So no worries about that. New fasteners. I'm gonna do the exhaust phaser. Get it around the chain and then pop it right on just like that. And then throw these 2 fasteners on hand tight and then back it off by half a turn. These phasers should spin freely just like that. So these phasers that have the gear spokes on them are still independent of the camshafts because they rotate freely. And then once we torque down these bolts in the proper sequence, the cam phasers will be properly mated to the actual camshafts. So when we pull this plug and the phasers are still loose, the tensioner will take up all the slack in this chain, and then we can go ahead and torque down all the phasers in the proper torque sequence, and we'll be good to go. All right, let's throw this tensioner in. Same as before, make sure that metal gasket is on there, and then we lubricate the guide shoes, and then we can wrap it around the chain. Okay, more or less, might just fall back in. And then we have 6 T30 Torx, all torqued down to 10 Newton meters. All right, let's put in these cam phasers. I'm gonna throw in the exhaust first, but it doesn't specifically matter which one is which. There we go. New bolt, hand tight. All right, now the intake, you can see some of that slack being taken up in the exhaust cam phaser as I twist the chain. There we go. New bolt, hand tight, and then let's back it off just like 1/8 of a turn. Same with the intake cam. And these should spin freely. Good, we have a little bit of slack because we haven't pulled the tensioner yet. Next, we're gonna pull the tensioners for both the cylinder heads. And there's a lot of spring pressure on there, so it might be a little bit tight. Same with this side. There we go. Okay, sweetheart, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get this cam variator tool. We're gonna put it over the top of that. And you're gonna hold it down, and then you're gonna get that torque wrench and put it on there. Those crow's feet are tricky, aren't they?
Yeah, it's kind of boring. Keeps
good.
moving.
Okay, so like that. There you go.
Okay.
Okay. And then you're gonna pull that up until it clicks and hold on to this because it likes to fall out of there. Then I'm gonna come in at 60 Newton meters, starting at the exhaust cam and then moving to this camshaft, and then we're gonna go over to the other bank.
Okay.
Okay, well, yeah, hold on to it first.
Hold on to
So,
this stuff.
is it still clicked?
Yeah, it's clicked.
Okay. That's a lot of torque.
It is a lot of torque.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm gonna go into here, hold on to it.
Got it.
Yeah, look, remember when I drilled through it so it would fit my tool?
Yeah.
That's funny, works. Okay, now you can let go.
Above?
Yep. Now I'm gonna do the intake while my lovely assistant is torquing it down. Okay, I'm coming here. Now I'm gonna do the exhaust. Okay, you can let go, sweetheart.
Okay.
All right, pull off the cam lock tool for both banks. Next, we're gonna come in and torque these down to 80 Newton meters. So 80, 80, 80, 80. And we don't need the lovely assistant to help hold the cam phasers this time. All right, then last but not least, we're gonna throw another 90-degree angle on these fasteners, starting with this fastener, this one, then finally this one. Same order as before. All right, let's pull the crank lock pin. All right, now let's turn over the motor. The spec calls for 1 full rotation, but I like to do 3 just because I just don't want to ever work on this for at least 100,000 miles. Okay, and then throw the crank lock pin back in at TDC. Make sure it's fully seated just like it was before. 100% in there in the crank, verifiable. I'm gonna give it an extra little bit of a turn, make sure it's in there, and the crank shouldn't move an inch, a millimeter, anything. And the moment of truth is when you throw the cam lock pin back in and everything just goes in all nice and smooth. Look at that. We timed a V10 perfectly. Let's do the other side and triple check. Same with the other side, look at that. Isn't that nice? Done. So it's really nice knowing when the motor is perfectly timed and you can get the crank lock pin and those cam lock pins back in and everything matches up perfectly. So if you like this video, please consider giving it a like, and until next time, thanks.